Hello dear students, welcome back to Top Lesson for You. Friends, as you know, we are recording about the posterior branches of the external carotid artery. So in the first lecture I discussed about the occipital artery. Now in this lecture we will record about the posterior auricular artery, right? So let's discuss about posterior auricular artery. The second artery from the posterior aspects of the external carotid artery, that is the posterior auricular artery. Okay. First of all, from where does this artery arises? This artery arises from external carotid aorta. Arises from external carotid artery. Okay, from which part? Posteriorly, from posterior aspects, right? Posterior aspects, right? And in which area of the neck region if this artery present? So this artery arises superior to digastric and stylohyoid muscle, right? So superior to digastric and stylohyoid muscle, right? This is the location and this is the origin of this artery. Clear, friends? Now let's discuss about the branches of this artery. What are the branches of posterior auricular artery? Clear, friends? So the first branch which arises from this posterior auricular artery is the stylomastoid artery. The first one, stylomastoid artery. Friends, if you like our lectures, please don't forget to subscribe our channel and share our lectures with your friends. Right, so stylomastoid artery is the first branch which arises from this posterior auricular artery, and it enters through stylomastoid foramen, right? It enters through stylomastoid foramen. Clear, friends? Very good. And what is this artery responsible to? Which parts of the body does this artery supply? So this artery is responsible to supply the blood to middle ear. It supplies blood to middle ear, inner ear, tympanic cavity, clear, friends? And furthermore, it is also responsible to supply blood. I have told you middle ear. So in middle ear, there the inner ear, there are semicircular canals, and moving forward, facial nerve is also in the part of the facial nerve which is present in the middle ear. So a little part of facial nerve is also supplied by this artery, stylomastoid artery. And the last thing that this artery supplies is the mastoid antrum. Right? You just should remember that stylomastoid artery is responsible to supply blood to these parts, right? The next branch which arises from this posterior auricular artery is the posterior tympanic artery. Posterior tympanic artery. Right. So this is the second branch which arises from posterior tympanic artery, and this artery is responsible to supply the tympanic membrane, right? As there is an anterior tympanic artery also, and this is the posterior, so both of them will unite and make anastomosis. So this artery is responsible to supply blood to tympanic membrane or eardrum, tympanic membrane. Right, friends. So the third artery which arises from this posterior auricular artery is the auricular branch. Auricular branch. Right. We will see all these branches in the diagram also. So this auricular branch is responsible to supply three different muscles which are present, and those muscles are called muscles of ear, right? So this artery is responsible to supply blood to muscles of ear, right? And there are three important muscles which are present in the ear, and these muscles are called the muscularia, or we call them anterior auricularis muscle, posterior auricularis muscle, and superior auricularis muscles, right? So let me write their name. They are anterior auricularis muscle, right? Then there is posterior auricularis muscle, and then there is also superior auricularis muscle, right? Okay, this auricular branch is responsible to supply blood to these muscles. The next branch which arises from this posterior auricular artery is the occipital branch, right? The fourth branch is the occipital branch. Okay. Occipital branch of posterior auricular artery, and this artery is responsible to supply blood to the skin which is present in the posterior and superior parts of the ear auricle, right? So it is responsible to supply blood to the posterior and superior skin of the auricle, right? Let me write it here, to posterior and superior skin of auricle, right? And one thing more, which is this artery, this occipital branch is also responsible to supply to a muscle which is called the occipitofrontalis muscle. Occipitofrontalis muscle. Clear, friends? This was the fourth branch. Now the fifth branch of this posterior auricular artery is the parotid branch. The fifth branch is the parotid branch. Look carefully. What does it mean? It means that this artery must supply blood to the parotid gland, right? There is parotid gland, so this artery supplies blood to parotid gland, right? Parotid gland is supplied by parotid branch of posterior auricular artery. Not only this one, but this posterior auricular artery also gives a branch there. And the last branches are called the perforating branches, right? The perforating branches. And these perforating branches are responsible to supply to different muscles which are present in the neck region. These may be the three important muscles which are present there. So the first one is the sternocleidomastoid muscle, cleidomastoid muscle. Then there is another muscle which is called the digastric muscle, right? Digastric muscle. Okay, then there is stylohyoid muscle, stylohyoid muscle, and also this is responsible to supply blood to some parts of the external auditory meatus. External auditory meatus. Right, friends, so these were the branches of the posterior auricular artery. The first one, stylomastoid; the second one, posterior tympanic; the third one, auricular branch; the fourth one, occipital branch; the fifth one, parotid branch; and the sixth, perforating branches. And these branches are actually the first small branches which supply these muscles. Right, now let me draw the diagram of this artery, and we will see that how this artery and what are its branches. So first of all, let me draw here our you can say this is our external carotid artery, right? You can see this is our external carotid artery, for example, and here is a muscle present which is called the digastric muscle. So let me draw this here. For example, this is our digastric muscle, right? Not all parts of this digastric muscle, but some parts I'm showing here. This is our digastric muscle. Now let us see the artery. Let me proceed it a little forward, and from here a branch separates. From this external carotid artery, a branch separates, and this branch is the posterior auricular artery, right? As it moves forward up to here, it gives off a branch like this, right? It gives off a branch like this. We will see all these branches, and I will name all these branches, right? A little more forward as it goes, so it also gives another branch, right? And I will write the names of all these branches. So a little forwardly it gives a third branch, and we know the names of these branches, these arteries. And if moving forward a little bit, so it also gives another branch, right here. Okay, let's move forward, and this artery will give two further small branches like this, right? Okay, so this is a very simple diagram to represent the posterior auricular artery. This is our external carotid artery, and this is a part of the digastric muscle. It is the posterior belly actually. So let me write it as digastric muscle, right? So the posterior belly of digastric muscle, and this artery is our posterior auricular artery, right? This artery is posterior auricular artery. You can see it is branching off from external carotid artery. Now the first artery that I had told you here is the stylomastoid artery. So this artery is the stylomastoid artery, right? The first branch. Then the second branch was the posterior tympanic artery, and you can see here is the posterior tympanic artery, right? Let me write its name, posterior tympanic artery. And I had told you that here we know that what these arteries are responsible to supply. And the third branch that we see here is, I had told you, the auricular branch, right? So this one is the auricular branch, and this branch is responsible to supply. I had told you there are three muscles, the posterior, the superior, and the anterior auricularis muscles. So this artery is responsible to supply. Now the fifth branch, which we have written here, is the you can see here this artery is the parotid branch, right? Parotid branch, right? So it leads to parotid gland, right? Then this one is the occipital branch. This is our occipital branch, and these are the terminal branches of occipital branch, right? So this is the occipital branch. And I had told you that there are some perforating arteries, perforating branches. So perforating branches are the small branches which arise from these areas, the beginning part, and they are responsible to supply the muscles, the stylomastoid muscle, sternocleidomastoid muscle, digastric muscle, stylohyoid muscles, and the external auditory meatus also, right? So this was, friends, about the posterior auricular artery and its branches and those parts which do they supply, and this is its diagram so that you can easily make the diagram of this artery also. This was the posterior branches of the external carotid artery. Now in the next lecture I will discuss about the medial branch, which is the ascending pharyngeal artery. Be with us, don't go anywhere please. Thank you so much.